Welcome. Tonight we drift gently back in time to ancient Rome. We will walk among soft fabrics, water basins, wooden tubs, washstones. We will smell linen drying in the sun, feel the cool of river water on fingertips, observe the quiet rhythms of laundering long ago. This is not a story of emperors or wars, not of battles or politics. Rather, it is a story of cloth and of hands, of labor and care, of the small daily acts that breathe life into what we wear. So settle in, let your shoulders relax, allow your breath to deepen. Let us begin. The intimacy of clothing. Clothing is more than fabric. It is the layer between skin and world. In Rome, just as now, garments carried warmth, dignity, and identity. Imagine waking in a Roman household, perhaps a modest one, a room with plastered walls, a wooden chest in the corner. A shaft of early light falls across a folded tunic, resting on a stool by the bed. The cloth, cool to the touch, smells faintly of smoke from last night's fire, of the herbs stored with it to keep moss away. Slipping it on is a ritual. The garment is not simply worn, it is entered, embraced, tied. It carries with it yesterday's work, last week's meals, a festival long past, and in time, it must be cleaned. The Roman wardrobe. The wardrobe of an ordinary Roman was not vast. A few tunics, perhaps, woven of wool or linen, one cloak for winter or travel, sandals for everyday use, leather stiff and weathered, and if fortune allowed, a finer garment for festivals. Dyed cloth, perhaps a mantle with a touch of saffron or madder red. A wealthy household, of course, owned more. Chests of garments, folded and perfumed, servants to tend them, and fullers to refresh them. But for most Romans, clothing was precious, limited, deeply cared for. To imagine Rome is not to picture togas flowing endlessly through marble streets. The toga was ceremonial, formal, cumbersome. Most people wore simple tunics, knee-length for men, longer for women. Children, too, in smaller tunics, stitched with care. Each thread told a story of labor, of shepherds tending sheep, of spinners twisting wool, of weavers pressing treadles on a wooden loom, hour after hour, day after day. Wool, linen, and rare silks wool was the fabric of Rome. Abundant from Italy's sheep, easy to spin, strong in weave. It absorbed dyes well, took on colors from herbs and minerals. The soft green of nettles, the red of madder root, the yellow of saffron. In summer, however, wool could be heavy, warm against the skin. Linen, drawn from flax, spun fine, offered relief. Linen was lighter, cooler, its threads smoother to the touch. White or pale, sometimes lightly dyed, it was treasured in hotter climates, in the southern provinces, and in Rome's sweltering summers. And then, there were silks. Rare, imported, costly beyond imagining. Threads carried along trade routes from the Far East, unraveled from cocoons, woven into shimmering fabric. A senator or a wealthy matron might own a strip of silk to edge a garment to display wealth. But for most Romans, silk was seen only in temples or in glimpses of the elite, the colors of cloth. The palette of Roman clothing was not the bright synthetic spectrum of today. It was subtler, softer, more natural. Undyed wool, off-white, cream, gray. Linen pale, ivory, touched with faint browns from the soil. Dyes deepened the wardrobe. Saffron and weld gave yellows, madder root, a dusty red, indigo, a muted blue, walnut shells, browns, rare purples, extracted painstakingly from sea snails, reserved for emperors and magistrates. For most, clothing bore gentle, earthy hues. Sunlight softened them further. Washing faded them. Life itself wore them down, until only memory of their first color remained. Garments as social markers. What one wore revealed who one was. A Roman citizen might be marked by his toga, wrapped in folds, difficult to wear, signaling status and duty. A freedman or slave by simpler tunics. A senator by a stripe of purple. A matron by her stola, layered and belted. But even in humbler homes, clothes mattered. To wear a clean tunic, mended and fresh, was to present oneself with dignity. Laundry was not merely a chore, but a renewal of self. The weight of laundry. And so, we come to the act itself. Laundering, a task that repeated endlessly, week after week, season after season. Clothes absorb sweat, oil, smoke from lamps, dust from streets, mud from fields. They bore the scents of meals, of olive oil, fish sauce, bread baked in communal ovens. Washing was necessary, not glamorous, not celebrated, but essential. And in its quiet rhythm, it connected Romans to water, to earth, to one another. Laundry in history. Historians often tell of emperors and wars, of triumphs and ruins. But there is another history. The history of everyday acts, of carrying water, of soaking cloth, of spreading tunics across bushes in the sun. Laundry rarely leaves monuments. Stones of aqueducts remain, but the hands that wrung out wool have vanished. And yet, by piecing together fragments, ruins of Follonica workshops, writings that mention laundresses, vats uncovered in Pompeii, we can glimpse this quieter history, the mood of our journey. As we walk through these chapters, we will not rush. We will move slowly, as one folds cloth carefully, as one smooths wrinkles with a hand. We will explore water, the lifeblood of washing. We will linger over cleaning agents, ashes and salts, humble yet effective. We will step into Foloniki, where workers tread cloth beneath their feet. We will feel the sun and air that dried garments into crisp folds. We will meet those who washed, women, servants, slaves, fullers, and those who wore the results with pride. And finally, we will rest at twilight with the soft sound of linen rustling in the breeze. A gentle transition. Close your eyes for a moment if you wish. Picture a quiet Roman courtyard, a clay basin, half filled with water, glistening in morning light. Beside it, a folded tunic, waiting to be washed. A fig tree nearby, its leaves trembling softly in the air. And somewhere, faintly, the sound of running water. A fountain fed by an aqueduct, steady, eternal. This is where our journey begins. Let us step softly now into the world of water. Water is the soul of washing. Without it, no garment could be cleaned, no stain lifted, no fiber refreshed. For Romans, as for us, water was both ordinary and sacred, everyday in its use, yet extraordinary in its necessity. Let us move slowly through the ways in which Romans met water, carried it, poured it, soaked cloth in it, and released it again. Each act was simple, yet bound to life itself. Dawn by the river, imagine a Roman dawn. The air still cool from the night, the sky just tinged with pale gold. By the banks of the Tiber, the city is only beginning to stir. A woman approaches with a basket of linens. The basket is wicker, worn smooth by years of use. The cloth inside is heavy, for even when dry, wool weighs more than one might wish. She kneels at the river's edge. The water, dark in shadow, reflects hints of dawn. A slow ripple passes as a fish breaks the surface. She dips a jar, fills it, pours the water into a basin she has brought. The sound is gentle, water over clay. This is one way Romans washed, at the edge of rivers and streams. For country folk especially, the river was the laundress's companion, the city's gift, aqueducts and fountains. But in Rome itself, the Tiber was not the only source. The city was proud of its aqueducts, those long stone arches carrying water from distant springs into the heart of the capital. Water poured constantly into public fountains, basins, and cisterns. At any hour, one could see men and women drawing from them, filling amphorae, jugs, buckets. For laundry, these fountains were blessings. Clean water flowing fresh could be carried home or to the fullonica, the public laundry workshops that process garments for entire neighborhoods. At a fountain, the sound was soothing, a steady splash, a murmur, a coolness in the air. To fetch water was labor, yes, but also a chance to linger, to greet neighbors, to pause in the shade. Wells and courtyards. In many homes, especially larger domus or villas, wells were dug within courtyards. Here, servants might lower buckets, hand over hand, listening to the creak of rope, the splash of the bucket striking water, the slow draw upwards. The well was a gathering point. Children leaned over to peer down, voices echoing faintly. Laundry water was lifted, poured into tubs, and carried to corners of the courtyard where clothes might be washed in basins.
Imagine the scene. A sunlit courtyard, walls painted with faded frescoes, vines climbing trellises, and at the center, a stone well. The splash of water fills the quiet, mingling with the soft rustle of linen being shaken out for washing. The fullonica, public workshops of water. Yet for much of Rome's laundry, especially in towns and cities, the fullonica was central. These were workshops, often large, sometimes employing dozens of workers. Within their walls stood great vats and basins, some sunk into the ground, others raised, lined with plaster to hold water and chemicals. Water was drawn in from nearby fountains or wells, then mixed with ashes, clays, or ammonia-rich liquids. Workers trod garments underfoot, pushing and squeezing them in the water, rinsing and pressing until they were clean. The air in a fullonica was humid, filled with the scent of wet wool, earth, and sharp cleaning agents. Yet within that dampness lay renewal. Stained togas, worn tunics, festival stolas all passed through the fullonica's vats to emerge lighter, fresher, almost reborn. Carrying the water. Consider the act of carrying water itself. An amphora filled could weigh many kilograms, balanced on a shoulder, supported with both arms, carried along cobbled streets. Women, slaves, hired workers bore the burden day after day. Their steps were careful, for a stumble could spill precious liquid. The jars were earthenware, heavy and fragile at once. Some carried buckets with wooden yokes across their shoulders, distributing the load. The rhythm of water carrying was steady. Scoop, lift, balance, step, rest. A pulse of life through the city's veins. The qualities of water. Romans knew that not all water was the same. River water, sometimes muddy, carried silt. Well water, cool and deep, could be clear, but sometimes hard with minerals. Fountain water, piped from springs miles away, was purest of all. For laundry, clear water was best, to rinse thoroughly, to leave no residue. The clarity of water could be seen by dipping a hand, watching the fingers blur or sharpen. Soft water lathered better with ashes or soaps. Hard water resisted. These subtleties were known, if not explained by science, understood by practice. The sound of washing water brought with it sound, the slap of wet cloth against stone, the trickle as garments were lifted, dripping, back into basins, the steady squelch of workers treading tunics underfoot in fullonica vats, the rushing murmur of fountains, ever flowing, never pausing. These sounds were part of Rome's rhythm, amid the clatter of carts, the cries of merchants, the barking of dogs. There was always somewhere the soft percussion of water meeting cloth. Water as ritual. Beyond its utility, water held meaning. Romans bathed, not only for cleanliness, but for ritual, for social life, for the refreshment of spirit. In temples, water purified worshippers. In homes, washing before meals honored the gods. So too with laundry. Clean garments were fitting for festivals, for sacrifices, for stepping into the sacred. To wear freshly washed linen to a temple was not mere vanity, it was reverence. Thus, the water that soaked wool was cousin to the water poured on altars, to the water sprinkled on hands in prayer. Evening by the stream. Let us imagine again the countryside. The day has passed. Laundry was begun at dawn, but still continues in fading light. By a stream, cloths are laid over rocks, damp but lighter now, clean. The sound of crickets begins. The air cools. A woman wrings the last tunic, twisting carefully, letting droplets fall into the stream. She shakes it out, smooths it, lays it flat upon a bush to dry overnight. The stream glimmers faintly under the moon. The garments rest. And she, weary but satisfied, gathers her baskets and returns home. Water's endless cycle. Water flows on, from sky to stream, from aqueduct to fountain, from basin to earth. Each drop that rinsed a Roman tunic once fell as rain upon distant hills. Each drop, after washing away dust and sweat, returned to soil, to river, to sea. In this cycle, laundry was only one moment, but a moment repeated endlessly, binding humans and water in an eternal rhythm of care. From rivers and fountains, wells and vats, we see how water carried Roman garments back to freshness. Let us now turn, slowly, to the substances that mingled with water, the ashes, clays, and salts that drew out stains, the humble chemistry of Roman laundering. When we think of washing, even today, we often imagine soap, perhaps a bar with a faint fragrance, or a liquid that foams easily in our hands. But in the world of ancient Rome, the idea of soap as we know it did not yet exist in daily life. And so, the Romans relied on other, older methods, ancient companions to water, that helped lift away the dust and sweat from clothing. These substances were drawn from earth, plants, minerals, sometimes even the waste of animals or humans. They were not glamorous, yet they were effective, and, for the Romans, they carried a kind of rhythm and familiarity, the comfort of knowing that with each rinse and each scrub, their garments could be renewed. Tonight, let us wander slowly through these materials, each one in turn. We will imagine their textures, their smells, their quiet presence in the wash basin. We will move slowly, as if handling each handful of ash or clay, each scoop of salt or liquid, pausing to notice the world that surrounded them. Ashes and the alkaline world. One of the simplest and most important washing agents in the Roman world was ash. After a fire had burned low and the crackle of wood had faded into embers, what remained was not only warmth, but powder. Pale, gray, often flecked with charcoal. This ash, when gathered and mixed with water, released a faintly slippery solution. We might think of it as primitive soap. The Romans discovered that when clothing was steeped in this mixture, the alkalinity of the ash could loosen oils, soften grease, and lift the sheen of dirt from fabric. It was not a glamorous process. Ash carried a dry smell, faintly bitter. It clung to the fingers, leaving a chalky residue, and yet, to the laundress or the fuller, it was precious. For every hearth, every cooking fire could yield the ingredient needed for cleansing. Imagine, for a moment, a Roman household at dawn. The cook clears the hearth, scooping cooled ash into a small clay jar. Perhaps some is scattered in the garden, perhaps saved for washing. Later that week, a tunic doled with sweat might be steeped in a basin with that same ash. Slowly, patiently, the residue of daily life would release, and the cloth would emerge lighter, brighter. Ash, humble, constant, always present wherever wood was burned, a reminder that even the remains of fire could help in the renewal of fabric.